on WOYK. It is the voice. Now that was Katie Porter with a news person who just was saying, what would you say to the 40% of people that she said, I'm trying to get every vote. So this lady follows up with a normal question, Ted. It says, okay, well, how are you going to get that 40% that are Trump supporters to vote for you? And then she pauses and she says, well, that's it. I'm calling this. I'm not going to do any more. And she wants to basically walk out of the interview. She ended up sticking around for, I think, like 20 minutes. But bottom line was that she didn't want it to air. She didn't want it on TV. Talk about this a little bit, Ted, because it's kind of an interesting case this morning.
It is interesting. And I think some people might initially look at this and say, well, that's kind of bizarre. But if you followed her career, you might have a different point of view and might say, well, that was kind of expected, or at least you're not surprised by it. But yeah, a couple of things. Katie Porter said that she was going to end the interview because the reporter kept asking follow-up questions. But that's what a reporter does.
Good reporters do that.
Good reporters do that, right? Because typically, as you're having a conversation, as you're having an interview, one question, one answer just begats another question. That's just kind of the way things are. That's the flow of the interview, and Katie Porter should know that by now. She's been in the public eye. She was a U.S. rep. She ran for Senate, didn't make it last year. So she knows the drill. She knows how it goes. And I don't know. I struggle. The part I struggle with is, did she not think that that this was, that declining to do the rest of that ending the interview is a bad look. It's just it's bad PR. It's horrible PR. It gives her opponents ammunition.
It's a big red flag if you're
right.
running for office. In other words, how many times are you going to be asked as a public official, any official beyond Katie Porter even, and you say, well, and I think that's one of the reasons that Kamala Harris lost, because she asked everything to kind of be scripted and everything was supposed to be laid out. And
right.
But the idea that people want to see is, how do you think on your feet? How
exactly.
do you think in a moment of spontaneity? How do you think when you're facing tough questions? Are you witty? Can you come back with a good answer? Can you
yep.
give factual material? Can you answer a question straight up? And she apparently has a history of not being able to generally do that. She's supposedly abused her staff. There's a lot of charges of her verbally abusing her staff. She had a divorce, apparently threw hot mashed potatoes on her husband one time, and with butter, by the way. All that kind of crazy stuff. But this is an example. Well, I'm going to end this. I mean, what an arrogant way of looking at it. You say, I'm going to do an interview, then it walks in, and it doesn't go exactly how you would like the interview to go, and so you're going to take your ball and go home. It's really, I can't imagine that this lady still has a 7-point lead. I mean, and when you watched her, I mean, the arrogance of this person. And that's one of the things that I think is so bad right now about, people who do this kind of thing, who are running for office, that they somehow think that they don't need to be accountable in answering questions. Now, if you're getting set up, if you're getting put in a position where, obviously someone's trying to do a verbal drive-by shooting on you, that's a different story. But these questions were not pointed in terms of any kind of side. It was just saying, well, what do you say to the 40% of people who voted for Trump?
Right.
Well, I don't need them. Or whatever. That's fine, but you're saying, I'm trying to get every vote. This lady says, okay, what do you say about those 40% who didn't vote for the Democratic candidate last time? What do you mean? Yeah, I mean, it's just, the arrogance is beyond me. And I think one of the things that, as I watched this interview, was that when are we going to return to some humbleness here for people who are coming from our midst, who were electing to represent us in a representative democracy? Your thoughts?
Yeah, a couple things here, Gary. First of all, I think that Katie Porter is used to grilling people. As a U.S. rep, she did a lot of that, apparently, on Capitol Hill. She has a law degree, so she's used to putting people up on the stand and grilling them. And it seems she gets a little uncomfortable when the shoe's on the other foot, when she is the subject of the grilling. And I don't even consider this a grilling. Like you said, all of the candidates, they asked the same questions to all of the candidates, and this question in particular seemed quite benign. The other thing, though, was I got to give props to the reporter, Julie Watts, because at one point she said, I will continue to ask follow-up questions because that's my job as a journalist. So that is great. I give her high praise for that, and keeping calm, standing up for herself, standing up for the profession of journalism. And yeah, they were. It sounded like CBS Sacramento was just trying to do a great job of reporting. And wow, they really ran into something here.
Well, I've done something like 6,800 shows over the years. Over the years I've been doing this. And I've had a few people, and some of them really well-known people that I've interviewed, who said, please send us questions ahead of time. I said, I will send you the questions, but if you give an answer, I'm going to have follow-up questions for you. I want you to know that.
Right.
So if you don't like that setup, then you probably don't want to do the interview. All right. And I was very careful about that. I never told somebody what my answer would be. And I never told someone, that's the only thing we're going to deal with. You ask the question, and then I'm listening, as this reporter did, and you said, oh, well, there's a question just came out of this that you just kind of brought up, but I need to ask this because that's what everybody else out there is asking right now, and I happen to be the person here. I have to sense that moment.
Right.
You've probably been in those kind of situations before too, Ted, where, this is the next question. This is the obvious next question in a normal conversation, right?
Exactly. And, in an interview with a journalist is under no obligation to give the questions beforehand.
Right.
That's kind of a gift if that happens. But I like your approach with hey, look, I'll give you the questions. This is the way things are going to go. But I'm going to have follow-ups if the conversation leads that way.
Play on your field to that extent. I will give you the questions ahead of time. Here's what I'm going to ask. I normally don't even like to do that. I like spontaneity. Right. I like to know if you can think on your feet. And most people can't. But, boy, I tell you what, then when you answer the question, the store's open. I mean, we're going to go shopping. And I'm listening, and I want to have an interesting interview with people. And, the only way you can do that is, and this reporter did a great job of it, is to listen and then to carry on to the next question. That's the most important thing, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You've got to forge ahead. She tried her best to salvage the interview. She said, "Hey, let's just go through the rest of the questions here." She did her best to quell things, and apparently from what we've learned, Katie Porter stuck around and concluded the interview. So that's good. That's good that happened. The other thing I found interesting was that at one point Katie Porter said she didn't want this, and I think she meant the kind of the contentious part of the interview. She didn't want that to go public. Well, I mean, you can imagine that. That's when you enter an interview, you're on the record, and so of course CBS aired everything. And then I was looking online. So it started with CBS Sacramento, but then CBS News, the network picked it up. And I'm sure it's been great for them as far as clicks and views.
I'm going to take a break. Hey, can you stick with us for an extra segment this morning, Ted?
Yeah, sure, Gary.
When you general election, and she's going to replace, she or somebody's going to replace Gavin Newsom. Maybe after this interview, she might not replace anybody. But she went on to say, that's it. I'm ending this. I'm walking out of the interview, and the reporter sitting there going, "You're not going to finish the interview? No, because you have all these follow-up questions. I mean, how dare you have follow-up questions?" Back with Ted Czech this morning, our resident guy checking on the press, also the author of "Saving the Beast: A Recovery Report reflects on America's broken media and how to fix it." Ted, one thing that jumps out at me here before we get to the next question.
Yeah.
Don't quit the interview because I'm going to ask another question. I'll follow up. But before I ask the next question, I am so tired of the arrogance of people who are our representatives. I think the arrogance, and not everybody's like this, but there's an arrogance that people have when they answer a question or they respond to a question that lacks courteousness, that lacks graciousness, that lacks the idea that you're doing your job. It's really become annoying to me, and I would dare say, and I hate to speak for a lot of people, that a lot of other people are feeling that way around the country right now. Your thoughts on that kind of point?
Yeah, it's interesting, Gary, because we want our candidates to be strong leaders. But
Correct.
sometimes being a strong leader, that there's a kind of another vein in there that sometimes happens. I guess it would be a fine line. You know, between being a strong leader and then it's kind of slipping into a little bit of arrogance there, as you've said. So yeah, it's kind of a tightrope that I think our candidates have to walk. It's not an easy job. It is not an easy job. It's not for everybody. Another interesting thing that I as I was thinking about the interview with Katie Porter was she said at one point, "I want to have a pleasant, positive conversation."
Right.
And that
Right.
that is not for her to say. That sounds like she's trying to dictate things, and
Right.
that's not how these things work. That's not how it works at all.
Nobody's
Sometimes
listening. Nobody's listening for that. I think they want a certain amount of civility, which you obviously had going on
sure,
in this interview. There wasn't any incivility here from the reporter or anything.
right,
But the point is, when you get asked a question about that, what about the 40%? Well, basically, what she was saying there was the hell of them. Okay, in other words, once you're governor, I don't know how it works in California, but I'm thinking Pennsylvania or in the United States or the rest of the civilized or uncivilized world. Once you're governor for everybody.
right,
So
right,
what is that 40% feeling right now? Just I don't need them. Okay, well, are you going to screw them over? Are you going to what's the thought? Ergo, what are you going to do? I mean, that's what people have to think. And so I remember Joe Biden said, listen, when he was doing his inauguration, he said, I want to be the president for the people that didn't vote for me too. Now,
hmm
people could argue over how well he did that and or didn't do it, but the point was, at least he understood that he was going to be the president for everybody in the country. He was my president. Okay,
right,
did I agree with him on everything? No, but he was my president. And so
yeah,
this idea is, if you're listening to this interview and you're listening to the answer to that question, Katie Porter is president for 60% of the people, if 60% of the people indeed would vote for her in California, right?
yeah. I mean that's well, she said, she kind of hedged on that when she said, well, I've represented a purple area, an area that's part
Right.
Democrat, part Republican. But yeah, she said she intended to be the at the end of the day, when all the dust settled, that she would be the Democrat running, so that she would then have all of the Democrat votes, the implication was that she wouldn't need any Republican votes, and so yeah,
Right.
you could see how that would cause uh, quite a lot of people to feel disenfranchised.
Final thoughts on this. About a minute left.
Yeah.
Who's the
Oh,
who's the
good.
best who's the best public figure, maybe in politics, maybe
Yeah.
not, that you've ever seen dealing on their feet with the press in a given moment?
I mean, there's a lot on both sides of the aisle.
Okay.
Some would argue that President Trump is very good at that, but that maybe he goes a little too far. He
Yeah.
gets a little too aggressive with the media.
Agreed.
But then again, the media needs to be able to deal with that, and they don't seem to be dealing with it very well. But yeah, even some of the other presidents that we've had out there, uh, um, President Obama, very very polished.
Very good. Yep.
Then you get, going back even further, not so polished, President Nixon. I am not a crook. I mean, that he's saying he's not a crook, but he's saying the thing that he didn't
Yeah.
want people to, and so that was just a really really bad look right there. So yeah, there's been
Maybe
good
Ronald
and
Reagan
bad.
was really good thinking on his feet, the great communicator.
Ah, yes,
John Kennedy was renowned for doing that kind of thing and having some candor. So hey, Ted, great stuff this morning. I hope people pick up Saving the Beast. It's on Amazon right now, and I'm looking forward to catching up with you again next Friday, my friend. Always an interesting segment. Thanks for giving us an extra time this morning.
absolutely, Gary. Yeah, not a problem.
Thanks, buddy. Have a great weekend. Take
All
care.
right,
Ted Check
you too.
right here on the Gary Sutton Show on WOYK. Well,